What if I told you that history hangs by a thread of chance? Like a carefully woven tapestry, pull one crucial strand and the entire pattern changes. In 1492, 3 ships left Spain and accidentally rewrote our world's history. But what if Columbus had stayed home? Imagine history unfolding along a completely different path. Powerful empires rising where they once fell, nations that never came to exist, and European powers developing without the resources they claimed from across the Atlantic. Today, we're exploring this monumental historical fork in the road, tracing how one voyage created ripple effects that shaped everything you see around you. The world on the eve of 1492, setting the historical stage. What if I told you that in 1492, the Americas were home to more people than Europe? The truth about the world before Columbus challenges everything we think we know. When we picture the pre-Columbian Americas, we often overlook the vast metropolitan centers that rivaled European cities. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, housed over 200,000 residents, exceeding the population of any European city at the time. Imagine the bustling, colorful markets and impressive temples rising above the lake waters. This metropolis featured floating gardens, complex canal systems, and architectural wonders that astonished European visitors, all demonstrating remarkable engineering prowess. Across South America, the Inca civilization had created another testament to indigenous ingenuity. Their road network spanned more than 25,000 miles, a monumental infrastructure connecting distant regions across challenging mountainous terrain. These carefully engineered roadways supported efficient communication, trade, and military movement throughout the diverse climates of the Andes. Spain's interest in funding Columbus emerged from practical circumstances. The country had just completed the Reconquista, reclaiming Iberian territories from Muslim rule. With Granada captured and Spain unified under Christian rule, the monarchy sought new economic opportunities. They weren't searching for undiscovered lands, but attempting to break into existing trade networks dominated by Ottoman and Asian powers. Columbus himself wasn't a universally supported explorer. Multiple European courts rejected his proposals before Queen Isabella took a chance on him, motivated by Portugal's growing advantage in Asian trade routes. He represented a strategic gamble in an economic race already underway. Europeans had actually reached the Americas centuries earlier. Around 1000 AD, Viking explorers established North American settlements, yet these didn't trigger widespread colonization. The Viking expedition lacked the convergence of economic necessity, religious fervor, and technological capability that characterized 1492. The Reconquista created more than Spanish unification. It established a template for conquest and religious conversion that transferred directly to encounters with indigenous peoples across the Atlantic. Fresh from victory over the Moors, Spanish conquistadors carried this worldview into the Americas. Uninterrupted Americas, the development of indigenous civilization. While Spanish conquistadors were exporting their worldview across the Atlantic, they were about to interrupt something remarkable. Ever wonder what 56 million people could have built if they hadn't been decimated by disease and conquest? The Americas weren't just populated places waiting to be discovered. They were civilizations on their own developmental trajectories, with innovations that might have changed the world in ways we can barely imagine. The Iroquois Confederacy exemplified indigenous political innovation. Imagine sitting in a Grand Council meeting of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and later Tuscarora nations. Representatives would gather beneath towering pines, speaking in turn as decisions were recorded. Their great law of peace established a form of representative democracy based on consensus and collective decision-making that could have spread throughout North America, evolving independently from European models of governance. The agricultural achievements of Mesoamerican societies were equally impressive. Aztec farmers created chimpanas, indigenous floating gardens forming a patchwork of green islands on lake surfaces. These brilliant techniques, combined with sophisticated irrigation and crop rotation, dramatically increased food production while supporting dense populations and complex social structures in environmentally sustainable ways. Beyond these engineering marvels, trade connected indigenous America through extensive networks linking regions as distant as the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Northwest to the Southwest. Without European interference, these pathways would have continued expanding, allowing knowledge, culture, and technological exchange between diverse civilizations. The astronomical knowledge of Mesoamerican civilizations was remarkably sophisticated. The Aztecs developed calendar systems of stunning accuracy. Given centuries more development, these mathematical frameworks might have evolved into scientific paradigms entirely different from European ones. The political map of the Americas would have evolved through dynamic interactions between expanding empires and confederacies, creating a diverse patchwork of indigenous nations with distinct technologies and governance systems rather than territories dominated by colonial powers. Redirected Europe, power, trade, and technology without American resources. As these indigenous nations developed their own complex systems of governance and trade, an entire ocean away, Europe's destiny was hanging by a thread made of American silver. Did you know that without the 16 million kilograms of silver extracted from the Americas, Spain might never have become a superpower at all? The Spain we know, the empire where the sun never set, would have likely remained just another kingdom struggling for relevance in European politics. Europe without American silver would be like a ship stranded in still waters. Powerful kingdoms stalled without the wind of wealth to fill their sails. Without these resources, Spain couldn't have funded its ambitious military campaigns across Europe. Instead of dominating the continent during the 16th century, Spain would have remained a minor player, creating a power vacuum others would scramble to fill. This vacuum opens fascinating possibilities. The Ottoman Empire, facing weaker resistance, could have pushed deeper into the European continent. Ottoman influence might have stretched beyond the Balkans into Central Europe, dramatically altering the religious landscape, with Islam potentially becoming dominant across larger portions of Europe. Meanwhile, in Asia, China's Ming dynasty would have avoided the economic chaos caused by American silver flooding their markets. Without this inflationary disruption, China might have maintained its position as the world's largest economy for centuries longer. European attention would have stayed fixated on eastern trade routes. Rather than establishing colonies across the Atlantic, European powers would have focused on securing trade relationships throughout Africa and Asia, potentially developing different commercial connections with existing powers. The dinner table across Europe would look alien to us. No potatoes in Ireland, no tomatoes in Italian cuisine. Imagine pasta without marinara sauce and no pizza as we know it. Corn wouldn't have transformed European farming, and spices derived from American peppers would be absent from dishes across multiple continents. Perhaps most significantly, without American plantation economies, the Atlantic slave trade would have taken a different form. African kingdoms might have evolved along completely different trajectories, developing their own networks without the devastating population loss caused by European slave traders. Delayed contact when worlds eventually collide. With Africa following its own developmental path, what happens when two civilizations that evolved independently for millennia finally meet as equals? Contact between Europe and the Americas wouldn't be conquest, but a meeting of sophisticated powers with their own technological achievements and imperial ambitions. Had European ships arrived in the late 18th century instead of the late 15th, they would have encountered a dramatically different landscape. Picture Portuguese sailors making landfall near Mexico City in 1792, gazing in astonishment at Aztec astronomical observatories tracking celestial bodies with precision matching European calculations. The captain might stand speechless before an Aztec metallurgist demonstrating alloys unknown in Europe, each civilization holding technologies the other coveted. The disease exchange would transform too. With 3 additional centuries of indigenous medical advances, American populations might have built stronger immune responses. Diseases would travel in both directions, European diplomats falling ill to unfamiliar American pathogens, while healers from both traditions worked together, each learning from the other's medical knowledge as they fought to save lives. When civilizations meet as technological peers, trade typically replaces conquest. Historical examples, like early encounters between the Iroquois Confederacy and European settlers, showed moments where exchange occurred with mutual respect. Instead of conquistadors claiming territory, we might have seen diplomats drafting trade agreements, each side wary but curious about the other's goods and knowledge. Religious exchange would follow a different pattern as well. Without military conquest backing missionary efforts, Christianity would face indigenous spiritual systems with their own complex theologies. Perhaps we'd see selective adoption creating unique syncretic traditions blending elements from multiple belief systems. The global map would be redrawn entirely. Imagine a world with sovereign indigenous nations establishing their own international relationships, Incan trade outposts in Pacific Islands, Aztec diplomatic missions in Asian courts, or Iroquois representatives negotiating with European powers. Technology would advance through cooperation, creating innovations unlike anything in our timeline. Conclusion. So what does this alternate history teach us about our world? The events of 1492 weren't simply about discovery, but represented a critical turning point where multiple historical processes converged. As historian Mahmoud Mamdani points out, 1492 marked the birth of the nation-state itself, with Spain's internal ethnic cleansing of Muslims and Jews deeply connected to its overseas colonization. These weren't separate events, but two sides of the same coin. History pivots on these contingent moments where paths diverge dramatically. The world we inhabit isn't the product of inevitable progress, but of specific choices made by individuals in particular contexts. When we recognize this profound contingency, we gain perspective on how our decisions today might create ripple effects that future generations will inherit. The greatest lesson from this thought experiment is humility. Our presence wasn't preordained. The knowledge systems and alternative futures lost to conquest represent genuine paths of human development cut short by circumstance. Stay tuned.